This is an ABC News special report. The death of Senator John McCain.
And good evening. We are coming on the air with some sad breaking news. A true American hero, six-term Senator John McCain, has just died, just 4 days before his 82nd birthday. The Republican senator, hailing from Arizona, had been battling an aggressive form of brain cancer since July of 2017. On Friday, Senator McCain's family issued this statement announcing his decision to discontinue medical treatment. John has surpassed expectations for his survival, but the progress of disease and the inexorable advance of age rendered their verdict. Cindy McCain later adding, "I love my husband with all of my heart. God bless everyone who had cared for my husband along this journey." Now, Senator McCain has spent the last several months at his ranch in Arizona, being visited by friends and colleagues from both sides of the aisle. He was a fierce conservative and a Republican, but not afraid to take on either party, earning him a place in history as a straight-talking maverick. In his final days, he read from his memoir, giving us one last lesson in putting country above party.
Before I leave, I'd like to see our politics begin to return to the purposes and practices that distinguish our history from the history of other nations. I'd like to see us recover our sense that we are more alike than different.
Those sincere words marking clear once again Senator John McCain's love for our great country. For more on the life of this American hero, we go now to Jonathan KARL.
Fighter, maverick, hero, a towering figure in American political history, Senator John McCain spent his life in service of a country he loved. His political career spanned nearly 4 decades. At times a partisan brawler, he rose above party politics with straight talk and a sense of humor. McCain often irritated his colleagues by bluntly railing against Congress.
This is disgraceful.
But in the end, few senators were more respected, even beloved. Born into a military family in 1936, McCain had little choice but to become a Navy man. He graduated from the bottom of his class in the Naval Academy and volunteered as a fighter pilot in Vietnam. While flying over Hanoi on his 23rd mission, he was shot down and captured by the North Vietnamese. Beaten and tortured, McCain nearly starved during his 5.5 years as a prisoner of war. After discovering his father commanded the Pacific Fleet, his captors offered to release him, but McCain refused. He would not leave while other Americans who had been detained longer remained in prison. He finally came home in 1973 with scars that he would carry for the rest of his life. He was elected to the House of Representatives in 1982 and to the U.S. Senate 4 years later. He launched a long-shot presidential campaign in 2000, bringing reporters along his Straight Talk Express. McCain tried for the White House again in 2008. The 70-year-old father of 7 out-campaigned a dozen primary opponents to secure the Republican nomination. McCain went rogue in his pick for vice president, choosing Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. As the campaign against Senator Barack Obama heated up, McCain did the unthinkable in modern-day politics. He defended his opponent.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen.
A gracious politician, even in defeat.
This campaign was and will remain the great honor of my life.
Already a cancer survivor after a bout with melanoma in 2000, McCain was diagnosed with brain cancer in 2017. True to form, McCain promised to fight and received a hero's welcome when he returned to the Senate floor just days after having brain surgery. Even as he fought his own health battles, McCain continued to call out his fellow senators over the increasingly bitter divide between the parties.
Both sides have let this happen. Let's trust each other. Let's return to regular order.
Then he cast the deciding vote on President Trump's attempt to repeal and replace Obamacare. And in November, just 2 days before Thanksgiving, he watched his daughter Megan get married. Senator John McCain, a proud father, husband, and patriot.
I've had the good fortune to spend 60 years in service to this wondrous land. It's not been perfect service, to be sure, and there were probably times when the country might have benefited a little less of my help. but I've tried to deserve the privilege as best I can. And I've been repaid 1,000 times over with adventures, with good company, with the satisfaction of serving something more important than myself, of being a bit player in the extraordinary story of America. And I am so grateful.
And Jonathan KARL joins us now on the phone. John, I know you tweeted recently about covering the campaign of John McCain in 2000. You said it was the most fun you had and the least amount of sleep. And as I watched that report just now, you think about Senator John McCain, and it's one phrase that comes to mind: he was born to serve.
He was born to serve, and that phrase that he said so many times, Tom, to dedicate yourself to a cause greater than yourself. And I have to tell you, this is an emotional time for me. Personally, I feel like I grew up as a reporter covering John McCain, covering him as that Senate maverick, as the person who was a Republican. He was a conservative. He was very conservative, but he was always willing to go up against the party. He was always willing to go up against his own party. He was willing to challenge Democrats. He was willing to challenge the conventional wisdom. He was somebody who, I think one of the underrated aspects of John McCain that we'll talk about as we go on over the next several days, and we should, is his fierce sense of humor. This was a guy who relished his role as somebody who he didn't care. He spent 5.5 years, Tom, as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and he decided to go into politics. He would have preferred to continue a career as a Navy pilot, but he couldn't because of what he endured, getting shot down and as a prisoner of war. He decided to go into politics, and he was a unique figure who was willing to stand up against the political powers. And that 2000 campaign, which he ended up losing to George W. Bush, but nobody thought he had a chance. And he won the New Hampshire primary by 17 points, and ended up eventually losing that nomination, winning 8 years. But that campaign, when nobody thought he had a chance, that was John McCain in his element. That was John McCain as the maverick, as somebody that was willing to challenge those that were in power, and a truly inspiring figure, a true American hero.
John, one of those things from your tweet was that photo, and you're there on that old flip phone, but you're right next to the candidate. And so many reporters sat so close to them on those long bus trips on the Straight Talk Express. What do you think it was about Senator McCain that he loved to have reporters close to him, he loved engaging with the reporters, and he wasn't at war with the press?
Tom, I got to tell you, it was phenomenal. And as a young reporter, really, this was my first full-blown experience covering a presidential campaign. To see somebody that I spent more time with John McCain in the back of that damn bus than his campaign manager, than his political director, than all of the people that usually micromanage presidential campaigns. We were back there, and by the way, Tom, it was always on the record. He invited the press in, and believe me, we sparred with him. I mean, I had a campaign event up in New Hampshire where he pointed me out and claimed that I could only speak Russian because I was a Bolshevik. I mean, he would fight with the press. And I had some tough encounters with him, but he was the most open presidential candidate that I had ever imagined seeing. And following that campaign and being with him and seeing it in real time, and truly an inspiring experience. And by the way, I covered that campaign. Some other reporters who well, John Dickerson, Jake Tapper, the people that covered that campaign, I think were forever affected by the time they spent with John McCain.
John KARL for us, remembering Senator John McCain and his time along that bus, the Straight Talk Express in 2000. John, stand by. For all of us who've studied, who've covered Senator John McCain, his legacy really was fighting for democracy, fighting for human rights, fighting for our troops, but also he firmly believed the U.S. had a moral role in the world. And this is something he fought his entire life for. And that's why he always tried to put country before politics. I want to play a soundbite now. This is from John McCain on the Senate floor talking to Republicans, especially Republicans who had maybe been moving to the extremes at times, and this message was for them.
Stop listening to the bombastic loudmouths on the radio and television and the internet. To hell with them. They don't want anything done for the public good. Our incapacity is their livelihood. Let's trust each other. Let's return to regular order. We've been spinning our wheels on too many important issues because we keep trying to find a way to win without help from across the aisle. That's an approach that's been employed by both sides, mandating legislation from the top down without any support from the other side, with all the parliamentary maneuvers that requires. We're getting nothing done, my friends. We're getting nothing done.
I want to bring in Terry Moran now, who's in Sedona, Arizona tonight. And Terry, you spent so many years covering Senator John McCain, both on Capitol Hill and on the campaign trail. You just heard that soundbite right there. He's appealing to people on both sides, really, to work together. He was, if anything, a patron saint of bipartisanship. And of course, I'll always remember he would go out there and make sure those bills didn't have the pork barrel spending. It was so important for him, as hard as it was, that Congress actually worked.
Well, what a life, Tom. And when you look at that kind of patriotism that we just heard, that we can fight, as he said, a fight that you don't join is a fight that you don't enjoy. So John McCain was no namby-pamby. He liked to get into the political trenches and slug it out in a way that was quintessentially American. And he knew it, he felt it, he lived it, where you could be a patriot, you could see that the person across in that fight from you was a patriot as well. And he was calling on his colleagues in the Senate, and from there to the country at large, which he did throughout his last months, reminding us all of who we were as the best versions of ourselves as citizens, not the worst. And I think for somebody like John McCain to see the hyper-partisanship of this age, a guy who had given so much to his country so often, was disturbing. But rather than get down about it, because I think one of the things we heard from KARL right there, he lived with joy. He lived with verve. You know, the Vietnamese couldn't break it out of him. Nothing could, not even a presidential defeat, which is a very difficult thing for anybody to go through. And he did have doubts whether he would have a future after losing the presidency. Nothing got him down. He came back even in his last months to tell us, as we just heard, we can do better. We're still the people we've always been. He believed in this country in a way that really we don't hear so much anymore. His patriotism, the patriotism of John McCain, which he gave so much in its name, is, it seems a long time ago, but is still there. That was his message to us in his closing days.
Terry, stand by for us on that point of character. I want to roll another piece of tape here. This was Senator John McCain. We saw this earlier, but I want to kind of go back to this. From a town hall meeting in Lakeville, Minnesota, October 10th, 2008. This is when he's campaigning against Barack Obama. Let's roll that clip.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you.
True test of character right there. I want to bring in now our chief anchor, George Stephanopoulos. George, talk to us about that moment there and how it plays into the current era we're living in right now in politics here in this country.
Well, it shows so much about John McCain, Tom. What it shows, but remember, John McCain, he was a hero, an American hero, an American patriot. He was not a saint. John McCain was a man with a vivid temper. He got angry at Barack Obama. He was angry at Barack Obama through much of that campaign, through his early days as a senator, when he thought Barack Obama was too much of an upstart as he came into the Senate, looking beyond the Senate toward the White House. But he had a deeply rooted sense of decency and character, and he was aware of his own weaknesses and aware when he might get carried away and when he knew that he had to calm things down. And that was what we saw in that moment. He knew there were lines in politics that you couldn't cross, even when you were angry, even when you'd lost your temper, even when you were running for the highest office of the land. And he demonstrated that again, and again, and especially in that moment during the campaign.
And George, your thoughts on the moment, you know, he loses the nomination in 2000, he then loses the election in 2008, but he didn't go away. And that is something rare in politicians. He didn't go away. He did keep fighting.
He tested out how to fight as well. When he lost that election back in 2000, when he lost the nomination fight to George W. Bush, he was tempted to go a different direction, and something that had always appealed to him, a direction beyond party. He looked at the possibility of being an independent. He tried to bridge the parties, tried to find issues that would bring parties together. Again, after the loss in 2008, he didn't go away. He went back to the Senate and fought, and we saw him fighting up into those final moments of his life. And you know, that quintessential moment of the last year and a half when he went to the Senate well and put that thumb down on the repeal of Obamacare. Again, he was not a fan of Obamacare. He was not a fan of Barack Obama, but he did feel that at that point he couldn't follow his party and repeal what Barack Obama had passed for the American people, and he wasn't afraid to go out there on his own and say no.
George, stand by for us. I want to bring in KOKIE Roberts now. KOKIE, who covered Senator John McCain on Capitol Hill. She also covered those campaigns as well, and so much of what's happened in Washington. You know, we're going to talk about today a lot about Senator John McCain and how he did reach across the aisle. I want to roll another clip here. This is an incredible moment that happened on The View right here on ABC, and this is when Joe Biden was on The View, and he was talking to Meghan McCain, one of the hosts of The View, and of course, John McCain's daughter. And they had this incredible moment, this very real moment, but you could hear in Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden's voice, the type of relationship he had with Senator McCain. Let's listen.
Your son, Beau, had the same cancer that my father was diagnosed with 6 months ago. And I'm sorry.
But look, one of the things that gave Beau courage, my word, was John. Mm-hmm. Your dad, you may remember when you were a little kid, your dad took care of my Beau. Your dad, when he was a mill aide, worked with me, became friends with Beau. And Beau talked about your dad's courage, not about illness, but about his courage. And if anybody can make it, your dad, her dad is one of my best friends. Her dad goes after me, hammer and tong. We're like two brothers who were somehow raised by different fathers or something because of our points of view. But I know, and I mean this sincerely, and I've said it all, even when your dad got mad at me and said I should get the hell off the ticket. And remember what I said about your dad? I said, I know, and I mean this sincerely, I know if I picked up the phone tonight and called John McCain and said, John, I'm at 2nd and Vine in Oshkosh, and I need your help, come. He'd get on a plane and come, and I would for him, too. And this is the guy.
KOKIE Roberts joins us now on the phone. KOKIE, talk to us about that. Some of his best friends, Joe Biden there, who was on the opposite ticket, a rival so many times, and of course, Senator Lindsey Graham as well.
And Joe Lieberman, who ended up an independent but was a Democrat. And in fact, as John McCain was dying, Joe Biden and Joe Lieberman went out to see him, and they posted pictures of the three amigos. But you know, John McCain, as my colleagues have said, was such a unique patriot. And in fact, when he arrived in Congress, I was covering him then in 1982, and he was already a celebrity as a freshman congressman because of the tortures that he had endured in Vietnam, and everybody knew about that. And so they wanted to be in his presence. They wanted to be somehow surrounded by his aura. And he he understood that, but he also had a sense of humor about it because he knew that, come on, it took me being, shot down to have this kind of effect. And that sense of humor got him through a lot because he also did have just an awful temper. And he could get very, very angry with his colleagues, with members of the press, and then he'd have to sort of come back and fix it. But in the last couple of days, Tom, I've been going back over many of the John McCain memories and the actual legislation, and the number of times that he talked about over the decades that we can't get anything done if we don't do it in a bipartisan fashion was just incredible. And it was on all kinds of things. It was on particularly issues having to do with reform. When Russ Feingold came to the Senate as a freshman, he didn't have any relationship whatsoever with John McCain. And John McCain sought him out, this freshman senator from Wisconsin, and said, let's do reform together. And then, of course, they did together the campaign finance bill, which is a singular moment of bipartisanship. And McCain always joked that people in Wisconsin thought that Russ Feingold's first name was McCain because of the name of the bill. But the truth is that his service to this country, his sacrifice for this country, his celebration of this country as the great country that it is, was something that made people, even when they disagreed with him, even when they were angry with him, made them respect and admire him.
KOKIE Roberts on the life and legacy of Senator John McCain. If you are just joining us, Senator John McCain has died at the age of 81. The president has just put out a tweet, a statement on the passing of Senator John McCain. We want to read it here. My deepest sympathies and respect go out to the family of Senator John McCain. Our hearts and prayers are with you. One of his closest friends, Senator Lindsey Graham, also tweeting, America and freedom have lost one of her greatest champions, and I've lost one of my dearest friends and mentor. That is Senator Lindsey Graham. I want to bring in Martha RADDATZ now because we are talking about a senator, we're talking about a patriot, and a man with an incredible history in the military, Martha.
Just an incredible history, Tom. At 81, we're all thinking it's far too soon for John McCain to leave us, but he never imagined he would live this long. I have to go back to 1967, and we talk about service, and we talk about sacrifice, and we talk about heroes, and I have met a lot of heroes. But when you remember what John McCain went through, it is truly extraordinary. In 1967, he was part of a 20-plane mission. He was going to hit a power plant in Hanoi. He weaved through about 15 surface-to-air missiles, and one of them hit his right wing, but he kept going. He dropped the bombs he had, releasing those bombs. He then, with the right wing sheared off, he's going towards the ground at about 400 knots. He ejected from his aircraft, and on ejection, he broke his knee. He broke both arms. He ended up in a lake. He was knocked out, sank to the bottom, but managed to wake up and push himself back up to the surface, even though his arms at that point were useless. There were angry crowds that gathered around him, and they were hitting him with rifle butts. And, of course, after that, he was a prisoner of war for those 5.5 years, really tortured, beaten, just an extraordinary story of courage and resolve to get through that and to get back home.
Point where he said at one point he almost wanted to commit suicide because it was that bad, and those scars, those injuries would last a lifetime. He wasn't able to lift his arms ever again. And, Martha, I know you had a moment with him at the Vietnam Memorial in D.C. Talk to me about that, and then we'll play that clip.
Last September, after he had been diagnosed with brain cancer, Ken Burns, who did the marvelous documentaries about the Vietnam War, we had a panel at the Kennedy Center, and John McCain was there, John Kerry, Ken Burns, Chuck Hagel. All of these Vietnam veterans gathered together with Ken Burns to talk about their experiences, to talk about what they did in the Vietnam War. Of course, John McCain was very humble. But I asked him about how often he went to the Vietnam War Memorial.
Let's roll that clip.
I want to ask you specifically how often you go to the wall.
Depends on the weather. Sometimes once a week, sometimes once every couple of weeks. I live not far away, and I try sometimes to go.
What's it
early,
like for you there?
Very early in the morning, or when it's near sunset. And not only do I enjoy the wall, but I enjoy shaking hands with the veterans who were there, it's really an incredibly emotional experience. And again, what it tells me, a lot of these young men died because of an inadequate or corrupt leadership. We have got to have leaders who will lead and will be able to give them a path to victory so that we will not sacrifice them ever again in a lost cause.
And Martha, it's so incredible because he ended up...
How emotional it must be for someone like John McCain to be at that wall. And that war shaped the man he became, shaped the politician he would become, shaped his view of foreign policy. He knew sacrifice. He knew service.
And his story with Vietnam didn't end there, Martha, because he even ended up working with Senator John Kerry, who later famously said a protester and a POW coming together to help open the door and work again with Vietnam later on in his life.
Exactly, and they have talked about that a lot. They became friends. It was difficult at first for John McCain to imagine going back to Vietnam and to reestablishing relationships in Vietnam or relations with Vietnam, but he did it, and they worked together beautifully on that.
Martha RADDATZ for us tonight. Martha, thank you. Cindy McCain, the wife of Senator John McCain, has just put out a tweet. We want to read it now and put it up on the screen for you. She writes, "My heart is broken. I am so lucky to have lived the adventure of loving this incredible man for 38 years. He passed the way he lived on his own terms, surrounded by the people he loved in the place he loved best." I want to go now to one of his close friends in the Senate, New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte. Senator Ayotte, your thoughts tonight on the passing of Senator McCain?
Yes.
Senator Ayotte, can we get your thoughts on the passing of your colleague and friend, Senator McCain?
Well, I'm just so sad to lose such a dear friend and someone who's been a tremendous mentor to me and so many others. But what a loss for not only his family and friends, but for the country. Just an incredible person. You know his courage, his integrity, his character, but, his sense of humor. He had just an incredible way of, self-deprecating, always making a joke, but also just what a leader. I mean, I had the privilege, I heard you talking about his Vietnam, and I had the privilege of traveling with him to Vietnam and to Hanoi, and you should have seen the reception that he got in Vietnam, years after, obviously, the sacrifice that he made as a POW there for our country, but the way that he was treated as someone who obviously was one of the first members of Congress to ask for normalization of relationships after everything that he went through there in Vietnam. I traveled in war zones with John, and he is, he was someone who, if there was a troop, a member of our military anywhere, John was going to go and visit them and support them and make sure that no matter how dangerous, that he would go and travel there and make sure they had what they needed. And just an extraordinary legacy that John McCain leaves. And I'm just, my prayers go to Cindy and his family. He has such a wonderful family.
And I want to talk about the family, Senator Ayotte. We're going to play a clip in a little bit of Senator John McCain on The View. But I want to ask you, he had 7 children, 5 grandchildren. Talk to me about Senator John McCain, the father and the grandfather.
well, John was so proud of his sons and their service. I mean, this is a family who the entire family served. You know, obviously, about his father's and his grandfather's service, but the tradition and the legacy of service and his sons have continued. And Cindy serves. Cindy is someone who has devoted herself to helping victims of trafficking around the world. And one of the things that struck me about John is that he stood up around the world for people's basic dignity and human rights, and he was there for the little guy, he was there for anyone who was oppressed, and he really just stood for the best of our country, not just in our country, but wherever he traveled around the world.
Senator Ayotte, we appreciate you for your time. This clip was one of the last times Senator John McCain was on The View with his daughter and our colleague, Meghan McCain. Let's take a look.
A picture of Meghan and her old man. And
this is, we hiked in Sedona when we were home, and I'm sorry. And it's really special on the top of the mountain, and I love you so much.
Meghan, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from your dad? Because you tell us so much about him.
That character matters, and that believing in something greater than yourself will always be important, and to really respect and love America and the people who sacrifice for us, and that America has always been great, and it's always going to be great. And I'm the luckiest person in the entire world. I mean, we are such a family that's filled with blessings, and we have such a bond and such a love, and I'm so grateful for that. A lot of people don't have that with their parents.
That's right.
Our colleague Meghan McCain, and tonight she has also put out a tweet remembering her father and a statement as well. We want to read a portion of that right now if we can put up the tweet from Meghan McCain. She writes, "My father, United States Senator John Sidney McCain III, departed this life today. I was with my father at his end, and he was with me at my beginning. In the 33 years we shared together, he raised me, taught me, corrected me, comforted me, encouraged me, and supported me in all things. He loved me, and I loved him. He taught me how to live, his love and his care ever present, always unfailing, took me from a girl to a woman, and he showed me what it is to be a man." That's just part of what Meghan McCain has said tonight, remembering her father. I want to bring in CECILIA VEGA now, who covers the White House for us. And Cecilia, the president has already weighed in, but the two men, Senator John McCain and the president, have had a very complicated and a very fractured relationship.
And a very public one, Tom. You know, the president has not hidden his dislike for John McCain. And frankly, John McCain didn't hide his dislike for this president either. This is a history that goes back many years. And in fact, there are reports in recent weeks and months that President Trump has reportedly not been invited to this funeral for John McCain that will come in days. We assume that, in fact, Vice President Pence has been the one who will attend for this administration. You know, it goes back after that Access Hollywood video surfaced of President Trump talking about women and what he called locker room talk. John McCain said that he would not be voting for Donald Trump, and that was a huge move for a Republican like John McCain to distance himself from a Republican candidate like that. And really the pinnacle of this, of course, all remember during the campaign when Donald Trump said that John McCain was not a war hero, despite, of course, his more than 5 years as a prisoner of war. And Donald Trump said that he wasn't a war hero because he was captured and we remember those words. He said, Donald Trump, that I like war heroes who aren't captured. And more recently, John McCain very vocally, publicly criticized Donald Trump's performance in Helsinki when he stood next to Vladimir Putin. John McCain called that a disgrace to the president. He said he'd never seen anything like that. And before that, he had said that Donald Trump very much fired up the crazies in his party. This was a White House and a president, frankly, that was frustrated by John McCain, someone who voted against the appeal, as George said, of Obamacare, that famous thumbs down vote in the middle of the night. And the president really never let that go. And John McCain never let what he felt was just an injustice coming from this White House in terms of tone and tenor And in his recent memoir, John McCain, I'm struck by words recently that I was rereading again when he said, "I'm not sure what to make of President Trump's convictions." You know, I think we will look back on John McCain in his passing as someone who represents perhaps a bygone era of politics in Washington now, Tom.
Cecilia Vegas for us tonight. Cecilia, thank you so much. Speaking of a memoir, we do have John McCain in his own words speaking about his place in history. Let's roll that clip.
I made a small place for myself in the story of America and the history of my times. The bell tolls for me. I knew it would. I hope those who mourn my passing, and even those who don't, will celebrate, as I celebrate, a happy life lived in imperfect service to a country made of ideals whose continued success is the hope of the world. And I wish all of you great adventures, good company, and lives as lucky as mine.
Ron Claiborne covered the Senator John McCain campaign, correct?
2008, yeah. 14 months.
What was that like? Because it was a historic campaign. He was running against Senator Barack Obama at the time, two senators going at it.
Well, Tom, I actually joined the campaign, the McCain campaign, when he was deep in 6th or 7th place among the Republicans back in the fall of 2007. He was basically out of it, and you had great access to him. He had nothing to lose, in effect, because he really didn't think he had a chance to win. He was staking everything on winning the primary in New Hampshire. You could get up close, sit with him, talk to him about anything all day, riding around on his bus. Listen, you talked about, we've heard a lot about him being a hero and a patriot. He was a good guy. He was a fun guy to be around. Make no mistake about it. He had a hot temper, and it could turn very quickly, but great raconteur, funny stories, and just a wonderful person to spend a lot of time with. And I spent a lot of time with him.
Ron Claiborne for us. We have David Wright on the phone, too, who also covers Senator John McCain, both on the Capitol Hill and on the campaign trails. Well, David, your thoughts tonight on the passing of this historical figure in our lives?
Well, Tom, two moments stand out from that campaign. One was the selection of Sarah Palin as his running mate, a huge surprise, and one that McCain later came to express regret over, because I think he felt that he opened the door to the reality show era in American politics, and he didn't like where it led to. The other, I was there that night in Lakeville, Minnesota, and that moment, just a few weeks before Election Day, when he said, no, you don't have to be scared of Barack Obama. I may disagree with him on the issues, but he's perfectly capable of being a good president, and we need to honor that. That was a very powerful moment. The first time I interviewed him was actually back in 2000 when I was a local reporter, and the cameraman that I was working with, a guy named Jeff Pierce, was a Vietnam vet. And after the interview, they got to chatting about Vietnam and about deployments and units, and they quickly determined, where they both fit in there. And McCain turned to him at the end of that and said, "Welcome home." It was a really powerful moment.
David Wright for us tonight. David, thank you. I want to go back to Terry Moran right now, who's in Sedona, Arizona, who's been covering sort of some of the services that have been happening since they released that statement. And Terry, you've talked to supporters of Senator John McCain. You've been out there. Some final thoughts as we wrap up.
You know, there's two things that come to mind listening to all of my colleagues and looking at those magnificent pictures. One, a life lesson, one, a country lesson. The life lesson, resilience. Think of how much John McCain went through and how often he came back. When he went to war, he had a baby who was 1 year old. When he came back, she was 6. She didn't recognize him. She was scared when he hugged her. And he went through that and came out on the other end positive about life. He had a great political career, and the country lesson is the thing he was trying to teach us in his last year, and that's we don't have to be this way. We don't have to hate on each other as much. And in that clip where he talks to the woman who says she thinks Barack Obama's an Arab and she's scared of it, the thing that is also impressive is the way he addresses her with respect. He says, "No, ma'am. No, ma'am." Today, you can imagine on lots of different kinds of shows and on social media, somebody would scream at that woman or insult her. And he was polite and then corrected her in the patriotism that he lived. And I think those life lessons, resilience as a person, resilience for the country, are part of his legacy.
A moment that stands out for so many. Terry Moran for us tonight. Terry, thank you. And over the next week, there will be many events to commemorate his life, beginning in Arizona, where he'll lie in state, and then to Washington, D.C., where he will lie in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. From there, his motorcade will make a stop at the Vietnam War Memorial, the wall of remembrance that meant so much to him. A memorial service will then be held at the National Cathedral before traveling to his final resting place at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And in his memoir, McCain described what he had hoped his final moments would look like, including his desire to be buried next to his fellow midshipmen from the Academy.
Then I'd like to go back to our valley and see the creek run after the rain and hear the cottonwoods whisper in the wind. I want to smell the rose-scented breeze and feel the sun on my shoulders. I want to watch the hawks hunt from the sycamore and then take my leave, bound for a place near my old friend Chuck Larson in the cemetery on the Severn, back where it began.
Senator John McCain, a proud father, husband, and patriot, has died at the age of 81. We're going to return now to our regular programming. Our coverage of the life of John McCain continues right now on abcnews.com, and there will be much more later tonight on a special edition of 2020 at 10 o'clock. I'm Tom Yamas. Have a great night.
I thank you for being here. I thank you for being Americans. I thank you for standing up for the things that we believe in. There are people all over the world that are watching this program, that are inspired by our desire for freedom of speech, for all of the good things that America is all about. We are still, as Ronald Reagan used to say, a shining city on a hill. I have loved my life, all of it. Some things didn't work out the way I hoped they would. I had difficult moments and a few disappointments, but by God, I enjoyed it. Every damn day of it.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.